Legislators thought they were moving close to agreeing on a bill that promises relief to children suffering from seizure disorders. But a new version of the bill legalizing medical marijuana has parents of those children up in arms. Want to convert your home to solar power? Legislators may give you a financial leg up. But some want to take away a tax credit that would give you a break when it comes to buying an alternative fuel automobile. It's day 4 of the 2015 session of the General Assembly. Lawmakers starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Bill Nygaard. Our panel is standing by, but before we dig into tonight's topics, Pat St. Clair updates us on the latest from under the Gold Dome. Hi, Pat.
Bill, we're coming to you from the House chambers. As you know, Republicans have been in the spotlight all this week, what with the governor's inauguration and his State of the State address. But today, House Democrats had the opportunity to be in the spotlight as they unveiled their legislative priorities. House Democrats are introducing 26 bills this session, focusing on 3 areas: economic security, educational opportunity, and shared responsibility. Minority Leader Stacey Abrams says shared responsibility is key to making sure citizens are not only heard, but actually have a role in implementing this year's legislative agenda.
So the House Democratic Caucus will be sponsoring a budget review and update on February the 3rd. To allow citizens to come to the table, having heard the hearings, having seen the news, and really understand what the proposed budgets mean for their lives.
Some of the main items they're backing include the Anti-Discrimination Act dealing with student scholarship funds, the Taxpayer Empowerment Agenda, which calls for transparency on the part of government when outsourcing jobs, and bills to increase access to voting and increase the minimum wage in Georgia. Representative Abrams says Democrats also want transit to be a big part of any transportation funding bill.
We believe and have believed for a very long time that any conversation about transportation must include a conversation about transit, but not simply transit in Atlanta, but paratransit, thinking about the 120 plus districts across the state that need transit.
Abrams says Democrats are not reaching for the pie in the sky, but instead are offering common sense solutions to the issues facing Georgians every day. New state school superintendent Richard Woods has a full plate as he begins his tenure this month. Governor Deal laid out his education agenda yesterday in his State of the State address, calling for a constitutional amendment to take over failing schools. Superintendent Woods says he hasn't seen that proposal yet, but he agrees no child should have to attend a school that is failing.
One of the things that I'm focused on is to make sure that our local school systems, that we are not doing anything that prevents them from being successful. Or is there anything that, as we look at, is there policies and things that we are doing that sets them up for failure? I think we need to look internally first.
Woods says he looks forward to working with the governor, but he also wants to make sure the needs of individual schools are addressed.
You know, I think that with someone or a school system that has a lot of English language learners or, you know, a migrant population, you know, their needs are completely different and very complex versus, you know, other parts of the state. So we have to have the flexibility, but I think we have to make sure that we have the tools in place that allow our school systems to succeed.
Also today, the school board approved revisions to what's known as the Common Core Georgia Performance Standards in English, language arts, and math. The revisions came after a formal review period ordered by Governor Deal last year that included 60 days of public comment. Also at the Capitol today,
Happy birthday, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
Today, several legislators honored Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on what would have been his 86th birthday. Senator Vincent Fort says Dr. King's message is relevant to many of the issues legislators will tackle this session.
You know, the implications of his work are with us today. Some of those issues of diversity and inclusion and discrimination will be taken up this session. And as we take up those issues, it's my hope that we can keep Dr. King in mind and ask how his legacy impacts what we do each and every day we're here.
Tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, there will be a ceremony here at the Capitol honoring Martin Luther King Jr. Governor Deal is expected to speak about his initiative to have a statue placed at the Capitol honoring King. Now, as you know, the legislature is not in session next week, so we'll see you back here, Bill, on Monday, January 26th.
Thank you, Pat. You know, every year there are a few issues that the legislature grapples with long and hard. Last year, it was the gun bill. This year, medical marijuana is back for an encore, and again, the devil is in the details. There's much agreement that it could help a lot of Georgians, but there's sharp debate over where that marijuana should come from and who gets to police its distribution. Joining us to start our conversation on that issue tonight, Todd Ream, Republican political consultant and editor of the popular website, GeorgiaPundit.com. Liz Flowers, she's the executive director of the Georgia Senate Democratic Caucus and media and government relations consultant. Greg Bluestein, he's a political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Leo Smith, the director of minority engagement for the Georgia Republican Party. Welcome to all of you. And we should say that all of you at one point or another have been spending time on our Friday radio show, Political Rewind. So it's great to have you on the TV side again tonight. Todd Ream, let me start with you if I could. So we have a medical marijuana bill that Representative Alan Peake is pushing very hard again this year. He looked like he was really making great progress, and suddenly the rug gets pulled out a little bit over the issue, not of whether cannabis oil should be legal, but where it'll come from. What's going on?
Well, there were two issues. One is that we learned last year that how you get this oil is very difficult. If you have to get it from out of state, you're breaking federal laws and you're asking families to do this. But having it cultivated in state has some major problems as well. And so he envisioned a highly regulated system of in-state cultivation, as well as some measures to allow parents to bring it from out of state. There was also, I would note, a dramatic expansion of the number of conditions that it would be available for, and it would have been extended to adults as well as children.
So initially what we were talking about, Greg Bluestein, was for children with seizure disorders, right? That's been expanded a little bit in version of the bill. But the real wrinkle here is removing this part of the bill which would have authorized distribution and I guess manufacture of cannabis oil within the state, right?
Yeah, we heard yesterday Governor Deal really put the pause button on this whole debate. He called for a study commission to really review who should be eligible to get this cannabis oil. He said he would support legislation that decriminalizes the possession of it. But as Todd mentioned, it's still an issue trying to get from one state, let's say Colorado, travel to Georgia. It's still a violation of federal law to bring it across the state line.
So, Liz, are we at a stalemate on this issue? Are these parents who say they need this so badly for their children going to be out of luck again this year?
Well, quite possibly. I don't know if we're at a stalemate. I think certainly Representative Peake and the governor have worked out some compromise language. But, you know, in the compromise, so many children with disorders that don't specifically fall under the redraft are going to be left out. And also, I think it's a matter of income level. If you're a parent that can afford to fly out of the state and find the cannabis oil that you need and then bring it back. What about the folks who can't travel? What about the folks who have children who are disabled enough that they can't travel by air or plane? And it leaves out adults. I mean, there's a whole range of, why only protect the children? Our children are obviously incredibly important, but we're leaving out all sorts of disorders and people who could benefit.
So when you talk about traveling, it is my understanding, and any of you are welcome to fill me in on this, that, for instance, a state like, I think Florida does allow for the purchase of cannabis oil, and you could presumably be a family in Atlanta and fly to Florida and get the oil and bring it back for use here. Is that basically how that would work?
Yeah, but there's a patchwork of laws, and a lot of these families are going to Colorado. So let's say they're driving back from Colorado. Is it legal in Mississippi, Arkansas, any states they might travel through could become a question.
Leo Smith, and we can turn back to Greg in a minute on this, but I'll get your reaction before we do. The Atlanta Constitution last weekend published a poll on a variety of issues, how Georgians are feeling about them. One of the issues was medical marijuana and simply legalizing pot in general. And medical marijuana had overwhelming support, 80+%?
84%.
84%. But legalizing marijuana for general recreational use came up to, what, 49%. Is it time to have that conversation?
Well, 49 is still not a majority, but it is time for the conversation. And I think just like so many things that we're dealing with in cultural shifts and age demographics that are now affecting polls, those things are going to be real issues that we have to chew on. I think just like this whole how we deal with the cannabis oil, it's the same thing. I mean, we're dealing with new ideas and new demands from citizens. And I think it's good to have just an ounce of caution rather than just an ounce of pot. And so you have an ounce of caution. You look at other states and what they're doing, and you do this stuff very measured. And I think the governor's approach to have a study group is wise, and to keep polling and see where we are. But I think we'll learn a lot as we start to implement.
But, wow, the reaction from parents of some of these children who have such terrible problems was really powerful yesterday, wasn't it, Greg?
Yeah, it's heartrending. The parents, they come to the Capitol, they come to these hearings, and they make the case in person to lawmakers. And a lot of them are still upset with Governor Deal. In his State of the State yesterday, he was also unequivocal about this. He does not support legalizing marijuana for recreational use. So if that's going to happen in the next 4 years, it looks like it's going to happen through the federal government.
Well, and then you jump in. He had a pretty good line about that. We want to be able to bring the children back from Colorado without becoming Colorado.
One other thing that's worth mentioning is that we've seen in the last week or so at Georgia Regents University actual trials starting on some of the cannabis oil medicines, and that's something that Governor Deal set up between the last session and this session. So there is some ongoing progress made, and there is some hope.
All right, so what's the guessing on how this moves forward? With these provisions in place, even though they don't please the removing the ability of Georgia to manufacture cannabis oil, does this thing pass as is and disappoint parents again?
Well, I think with the governor's statements on it, we're probably going to see the passage of the redraft he's talking about. As Greg brought up, I mean, there's a lot of issues about, different states in play. I mean, the president has basically said what you do in your state is going to be okay, and the feds are going to look the other way. But when we start doing this patchwork and crossing state lines with different things, and I think another point of this may be another point of the administration needing to catch up to the will of Georgians. I mean,
what do you think the will of Georgians is? When you see 49% essentially believe that we should have recreational pot in this state, does that tell you everything you need to know?
Well, it tells me a lot of what I need to know.
Do you think Democrats would get behind that in the legislature?
I don't know that it would be a unified, but I think many Democrats would. And I also point back to Sunday sales. I mean, for 5 years, the public was saying, why aren't we passing this? And I think this is one of those similar issues where the administration needs to catch up to the people of Georgia.
You're something of a libertarian, Mr. Ream. Would you get out front on the notion of legalizing pot for recreational use? Do you think the legislature that it is time to have this conversation?
I think that's going to be part of the overall conversation. I don't think it'll pass anytime in the near-term future.
Yeah.
That said, if you had asked me a year ago today, I would have thought there was no hope of medicinal marijuana passing. That debate changed overnight over the matter of a couple weeks last year.
You're nodding. It did change dramatically.
It's funny
didn't
how
it?
quickly that changed. I mean, and it died literally in the last hours of last year's legislative session over infighting, not over the language of the bill, but infighting over different other issues between the House and Senate. This year, there's definitely momentum behind it. I think it's almost a lock that there's some sort of legislation that decriminalizes the possession of the cannabis oil that passes.
And we will have, although it's not likely to go very far, the beginnings of a conversation about whether Georgia should join Colorado, the state of Washington, the District of Columbia, states that might look at legalizing recreational marijuana.
Yeah, Democratic Senator Kurt Thompson made sure we will. He proposed a bill that allowing for just that. So at least there'll be the beginnings of an inkling of a debate, maybe some hearings early this session about that issue.
Okay, so we have just a couple of minutes left before we have to break. And let's take a look just for a minute. We saw the governor's State of the State speech last night. And I want to, if you don't mind, let's plunge into one of the issues that he did not address in that speech. We had a very spirited discussion on the show on Tuesday night about the religious liberty bill. We think the governor has now said he's going to sign up and support this effort to protect people in their religious beliefs from having any punitive action taken against them if they speak out in the workplace or in government places. Where's that headed?
I think it's headed for a series of contentious debates in committee. It'll be you'll see a lot of folks coming to the committee meetings. You may see some protests. It's become more of a media debate, a debate staged for the media, than to change people's minds within the legislature.
So, but nevertheless, I mean, there is a real effort. Josh McCoon, for certain, is pushing this very hard, is he not?
Yeah, I mean, it still has a pulse. The governor's comments on Tuesday said that he essentially doesn't see that it's as discriminatory as some of the critics see it as. Now, corporate forces, the chambers, even House Speaker Ralston have all raised issues about it. But when the governor said that, I think it was somewhat of an olive branch to the forces behind the religious liberty bill, saying that, hey, I'm willing to support you on this one if you support me for other things down the line.
The fact that he didn't talk about it in the speech doesn't mean that he doesn't think it's a good idea. It just means he, thinks it's better to keep quiet about it right now?
Well, Bill, I tend to be a little bit of a political cynic on a number of things. I think that the religious freedom bill is being tied up in some other deals that are going down on some other major legislation. And so I think to appease one group of people, he's maybe considering this where he might not have a few weeks ago. The problem is that the groups all tend to move around depending on, where's the chamber on this versus where's the chamber on that. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. Leo Smith, it's going to be interesting to watch this develop, especially the African-American caucus on this issue, because of the way it involves Kelvin Cochran, the fire chief who was fired, in part because he made some comments about gays and lesbians, that he felt they were behaving in an unchristian way. So this puts the Black Caucus in an interesting place, doesn't it?
It does, and it also, puts a strain on the relationship between them and, say, Mayor Kasim Reed. I mean, it's really a strange environment when you see Mayor Reed being called a racist, actually, by some of the religious and clergy leadership in Georgia for his position on this stuff, and now this thing is becoming a little bit nationalized, where prominent African-American bishops and pastors from around the country are starting to weigh in on this. And you'll see more of them coming to the state of Georgia to add their voice to this issue, as they feel is a threat to their whole culture.
And there was a reason you didn't see Josh McCoon and Sam Teasley play a leading role in that rally on Tuesday that Leo was talking about. And that's because Kelvin Cochran does not make for the best poster child for this, in their view, the best poster child for this legislation.
Why not?
Because he was fired after he wrote anti-gay comments in a book. But Mayor Reed cited his reason for firing him not because of the anti-gay comments, but because he didn't clear the book's publishing with the mayor.
Right.
So that gets into a different ground that maybe this religious liberty bill would not have protected.
All right. We're going to come back to this issue over and over. I'm certain it's going to be alive for a long time in the legislature this session. Take a pause for a minute. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at an interesting, I think, contradiction in terms of legislative intent. On one hand, the legislature appears poised to be able to come up with some method that will help you afford to make your house solar powered. On the other hand, they're looking at the possibility of taking away the tax credit you get for buying an electric car. What's up with all of that? But first, another edition of Know Your Legislator. Representative Michael Caldwell is a Republican from Woodstock representing House District 20. Can you say overachiever? In addition to hand copying the entire New Testament in high school, he earned a college degree in business finance in less than 3 years. He began his first campaign for a seat in the State House at the age of 19. Caldwell didn't actually get elected until the ripe old age of 23. When he did, that made him the youngest elected state representative in the United States. We'll be right back. The Georgia General Assembly has operated continuously since 1777. That's when Georgia became one of the 13 original states and revoked its status as a colony of Great Britain. And we have not looked back since we turned our backs on Great Britain. Welcome back to Lawmakers. Once again tonight, we're joined by our great panel of insiders, including Todd Ream, the editor of GeorgiaPundit.com. I encourage you to look at that site every day. You'll get great information about what's happening politically. Liz Flowers is a Democratic consultant and works with Democrats in the Georgia State Senate. Greg Bluestein, political writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Leo Smith. Leo is the minority director for the Georgia Republican Party. So, Greg, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but it seems to me on one hand the legislature is giving and on the other taking back in terms of different kinds of alternative energy. On one hand, there is a move by Chuck Martin from Alpharetta to reduce the amount of the tax credit for electric vehicles. It's $5,000 right now.
Right now it's $5,000, and there's also a federal tax credit for $7,500, which means that in some cases you can get a lease on a Leaf for almost no money.
Okay. So he wants to look at whether they're giving away the store on this. And at the same time, it appears that a deal is being made that will allow people to finance solar-powered for their houses much more readily than they could. Explain that, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, Georgia Power and the energy co-ops struck a deal, and this has been a long time in the making, to essentially allow for third-party financing to pave the way to make it easier for small business owners and homeowners to put solar panels on their roofs. And for a long time, Georgia Power, I think, saw this as somewhat of a threat to their basic business, but they finally sort of dropped opposition and they see a compromise in the works.
Okay, so panel, are they sending mixed messages about how serious they are about whether we should be looking at alternative energy sources, or are these such different matters that I should stop worrying about this? Leo Smith?
Well, no, I think that this is somewhat of a challenge between the forward thinking that looks like you're in California, but you're actually in Georgia. And so we have these debates about, I mean, first of all, people don't like driving in Georgia at all. And now we're talking about driving a different kind of car that's still going to be stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
So I think it's just new stuff. And it's taken a while to look at all the alternatives and what it all means for the state of Georgia. But you also have to look at ways to increase revenue in order to deal with some of the infrastructure needs that we have in Georgia.
Liz, is it your sense that Georgia's legislature as a body understands the importance of finding alternate sources for energy, or are they still basically a fossil fuel group of lawmakers?
Well, I don't think Georgia's the only one in that position. I think a lot of states are looking at, how do we reconcile making sure certain industries, whether you're doing coal or anything else, how do we reconcile that with some of the new technologies that are available? But what I do think on the funding issue on this is that this is very much like Georgia in that we have this patchwork of reform, whether it's tax reforms or the lack thereof that we do, whether it's tax breaks for big corporations. We haven't sat down and looked at it holistically and said, is it smart to do this on one hand while we're taking this away over here?
Exactly, and that's my question.
Isn't that part of the whole big budget picture, though? I mean, we're looking at, we're having reduced revenue from less use of gas per mile and then the reduction in gas prices, and we got to figure out how do we get revenue up in that. And now we're talking about, can we get reducing the amount of revenue we get on car sales, right? So this is a big picture problem.
I think there's a legitimate rural-urban divide on the electric vehicle as well,
right.
Where I would be willing to bet that 95% of the electric vehicles are titled in either Fulton or DeKalb County, but you have taxpayers across the state subsidizing, a hipster lifestyle.
Right.
Well, of course, go ahead.
That's exactly the point Chuck Martin made. He's from Alpharetta, so he's not, he's not a rural lawmaker by any means, but he did say this is a tax subsidizing in-town folks who don't have to commute that very far. I mean, these Leafs can't go, tremendous amounts of distance, so they need to be in shorter commutes.
Okay, so presumably a tax credit for an electric vehicle is put in place to reduce dependency on what used to be foreign oil. It's now mostly domestic oil, right?
That's part of it. There are also aspects of congestion mitigation in the Atlanta area. We've had the smog issues for years and years and years, and it's a way of reducing direct production of hydrocarbons in Atlanta. And it's also a way of sort of jump-starting the build-out of the infrastructure that it takes to support electric cars. You have to have a critical mass of electric cars before charging stations become common. And so there were a combination of reasons to do it, but all of those reasons tend to benefit Metro Atlanta, and particularly in-town parts of Metro Atlanta.
Okay, let's look with a couple minutes we have left at another issue that relates to automobiles. Who here at this table has actually had a chance to drive a Tesla, Todd Ream?
I have had that opportunity, and it's every bit as fun as you think it is.
Okay, so the issue is the Tesla manufacturers want to be able to sell their vehicle directly to consumers. They've got a little showroom at Lenox Square Mall where they are going to sell some cars. And the Georgia Automobile, how powerful are the Georgia Automobile Dealers Association?
I think fairly powerful.
Fairly powerful? Are they one of the most powerful lobbies downtown?
I'm not going to make that judgment.
All right, so here's the battle, right? Tesla wants direct sales. Georgia manufacturer or car dealers are saying no way. That's going to be quite a battle, isn't it?
And it's one that does not split down party lines. We reporters, we like these battles that don't split down ideological lines. It'll be interesting to watch to see how it kind of shapes up, because there are some who say that it's a free market. Tesla should be allowed to sell to whoever they want. There's others that are, especially, and the Automobile Dealers Association counts a few lawmakers in their ranks who are diametrically opposed to this.
So we're now looking at the same issue we've had with Uber last year and the taxi cab drivers. Basically, right? We're talking new technology, new approaches, new model for doing business as opposed to traditional models, right,
It's
Leo?
an exciting time to be in politics in Georgia and dealing with policy in Georgia. That, you know, you have these issues that are new issues that are, as Todd has already mentioned, a lot of things are being driven by the urban market, and the rural communities aren't that interested in those issues.
Do you like that Tesla?
I did. And one thing that the company says is that it requires the company's support to make these viable to use across the state.
Exactly. All right, look, we're out of time. We've got to get out of the show tonight. Day 4 of the 2015 legislative session is now a wrap. Thank you all for being with us tonight. We hope you'll come back and join us for the next edition of Lawmakers. But in the meantime, stay in touch with us on social media or email us your questions or comments to lawmakers@gpb.org. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Bill Nigut. Have a great evening.
This is a GPB original production.